Hi, this is Prior to your station, and today we bring you day 594 of Russian war with Ukraine. Obviously, part of the news today will be dedicated to Israel and events unfolding there. Our usual thanks go to our supporters. Thank you, Grisha, and thank you, Anya Kuchta. Thank you for sticking with us. Also, thank you, Bill, for your super thanks and your continuous patronage of our streams. And with this, let's deep dive into day 594. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolay Feldman. We're starting War Diary with Alexey Arestovych. Hello, Alexey. Good evening, everybody. Yuriy Romanenko must join us soon, but he's traveling. We'll see if he can. Anyway, we would be glad if he does. We had to cancel and move our stream from yesterday to today, so apologies for these, and we can discuss more news related to what's going on. First, of course, top news is everything related to Israel, what's happening there. According to world media, there are over 1,000 deceased, killed as the results of Hamas attack on Israel. Agencies reference Israeli ambassadors in the United States, and American media giving us a number over 1,000 victims. Israel started blockade of the Gaza sector, and they basically have started a siege of it, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel said that Gaza will not exist in its previous format. So how far will Israel go, and what will happen to Gaza? Alexey, what do you think? Where do they stop in this situation? I think it is up to Israel to decide what to do. They're in a very complex situation there in the Middle East, and how far do they want to go? But I want to say 360,000 reservists are not being mobilized for nothing. For Gaza, they would have a plenty if they had 120,000, with some to spare. So it means Israel is getting ready seriously to repel possible attacks of Hezbollah on the north. And yesterday there were attempts of Hezbollah to penetrate the border, and Israel today is making aviation strikes on some of the targets. Hezbollah is by an order of magnitude stronger than Hamas. They can seriously give difficulties to Israel and a lot of issues. They have thousands of missiles that can fly for most of the territory of Israel. We also can mention that American Second Strike Group is moving towards the shores of Israel. And here, one of the questions that we can bring, Americans have already allowed to discuss operation by force to liberate some of the American hostages in Gaza. There are at least 130 hostages and young kids among them. So Americans are very serious about possible using force in liberation these hostages. Second, there are a lot of publications in the world about Iran's involvement in this trouble, and the Russian Federation is somewhere on the outskirts of that picture. So the question is, will the physical operations go as far as punishing the sponsors of these events? And here Israel and United States are ready. They have practiced joint hits on aggressors before, but I'm quite sure that reaction will be harsh, and we'll see how far it will go. There are certain estimates popping up in the media that dwellers of Gaza might be pushed towards Egypt, and in this scenario, Gaza may cease to exist as it is, but I think this is way too extreme of estimates. There probably will be a very harsh operation, but Gaza as an enclave will probably stay alive. However, Minister of Defense of Israel is saying that Gaza will not be left in the way it was before. Many things are changing in the Middle East, and they're changing rapidly. They're changing by day or half day, several hours, so we'll have to keep an eye on this. The worst scenario for Israel is if Hezbollah starts to attack Israel on the north actively and start using missiles, and then if Iran will join and use some ballistic missiles or drop some troops through Syrian border or through Lebanon. So those 360,000 that they mobilized in Israel, this is their readiness for fighting war on three fronts. They know the difficulties and the issues, and they're getting ready for the worst possible events. So do you think Israel can have a war on more than three fronts? No, I don't think so. Egypt and Jordan, I don't think they're ready to fight with Israel. And everybody else, I don't think they will really intervene and join the war with Israel on the side of Islamic jihadists. Plus, most of the neighbors also do not favor Iran much. So Netanyahu made a statement that he is looking to reformat the whole Middle East situation because that military operation they are conducting now will ultimately lead to reforming the relations in the Middle East. First question in this relation, how far does that Middle East go? Can it include Iran? Well, technically, Nikolai, Iran is the medium or middle, a different segment of an East, right? In Russian, it's called Middle East, really, and Israel is closest. So, for now, this is just statements. There are no concrete things. Nobody will declare that they will go and attack Iran, at least on this stage. But the fact that it is a long and complex story that will shake the foundations of Middle East, we'll see, and I'm sure there'll be some changes, of course. But after 1,000 victims, and now there are more messages that in Kibbutz Beria, they found some children with heads cut off and burnt bodies. That needs to be re-verified, but if it is truth, we understand what will be the end of those who are involved in aggression against Israel and also countries supporting those in the Middle East. President of Turkey, Erdogan, made a statement expressing his ambition to perform an intermediary role in that big war. And he said that right now is the time to find ways to solve this conflict and to resolve this war. Do you think he has a plan, or did he just apply as a possible peacemaker? Erdogan, as he returned to power in Turkey, he sent a ship, Marmarat, from Turkey to support Gaza insurgents from Turkey, and that vessel was captured by Israel. And that these relations were just getting better on the background of Turkey and Israel joint help to Azerbaijan, but they're not fully equalized because Erdogan is occupying pan-Osman, pan-Turkish positions in this area, somewhat local imperial positions, and he already actually did accuse Israel in the conflict and then supported Palestine, but later he paddled back and came back with a proposition to be a peacekeeper. So one needs to understand that direct military involvement and intermediary position are both two very strong roles one country can play in a conflict. Intermediary is probably just as strong because you get an ear of both sides of the conflict, you get involved in everything related to that, and that's why many countries who can gladly jump into this position. So Erdogan, by the way, is an intermediary between Russia and Ukraine for grain deal, right? Now he wants to intervene as a peacekeeper, as the intermediary between Israel and Palestine. It would have been a strong position for Turkey, but I don't think it will play out this way because right now there may be an option later. Right now the main focus is on freeing the hostages. But if you look at Erdogan, Alexey, his ambitions very often turn to life, right? They recently eliminated the gray zone that existed for over 30 years between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Well, yeah, Erdogan is a serious player. Turkey is a serious player regionally. Nobody can neglect them, especially in that part of the world. But there is a limit to how much intermediary work can you do. For example, Erdogan failed to be truly successful with a grain deal between Ukraine and Russia. And it'll be yet to see if he will be able to be selected as an intermediary, especially after there were some serious victims on the Israeli side. And one needs to understand that both Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these terrorist groups, they're now much stronger than what they were 20 years ago. When there was a last serious conflict with Hezbollah, Israel had to sit for 3 months in shelters because their threats of missiles were pretty serious. And Israel cannot afford themselves to sit in shelters for 3 months now, while Hezbollah has only become stronger. So Israel is faced with an option, with a choice to resolve this matter drastically, in some radical fashion, when they lower the capacity of possible foes that they would not have a capacity to attack them in any significant fashion. So I do not suspect Israel will enter Lebanon, but I suspect they will try to dwindle the capacities of Hezbollah as well. And if you move one framework up, there is a bigger question of reforming the whole peace system in the Middle East, because Israel now is, the whole world is facing the failure of policies and politics towards the Arab nations in the Middle East versus Israel. How to resolve it, it's up to them, but the previous one doesn't work, obviously. So I guess now they have to review the ceiling of their development, of their relational development with the neighbors. Do you think they can review that? Do you think they're capable of addressing this? I think so, because Israel is forced now. The war always forces you to review all of your propositions and all of your statements of security and policies. So Israel needs to now address it, either create a new plan or without a plan, we'll get some sort of new Israel as a result of this war. Let's go to the northern side between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is obviously interested in this conflict, according to Vladimir Zelensky's statement, and he is also pointing at Russia and saying that Russia is one of those countries that are backing up Hamas. And he made the statement with the president of Romania in Bucharest. We understand who stands behind Hamas. There are several countries. Everybody knows their names, and they are supporting Hamas with weapons and other resources, and called upon NATO to join arms against terrorists, outlining that it's the same tactics that Hamas is using in Israel as Russia is using against Ukraine. There was also a statement in the news yesterday, I don't know if you saw that, Ukrainian intel highlighted that Hamas is using some of the weapons that are supposedly taken from Ukrainians or captured by Russians on the Ukrainian front and then delivered to Hamas to be used in this conflict. Do you think this is the right position that Zelensky outlines for Ukraine now? Do you think it's serious and matching the realities? Yeah, I think it is more than serious and proper. I did talk about it today on the forum that I was attending. The thing is that there is a new chain of axis of evil. Iran, Beijing, Syria, and Hamas, and Korea. They exchange technologies, they cooperate against the collective West, and I'm waiting for a collective West to finally wake up. So it's good to see that they're slowly waking up to that and start to do something about it. Transfer of arms is a typical step that Russia always makes, which is also part of that axis of evil in this case. And they like to re-emphasize the conflicts, and they want to transfer some of the arms captured from the Ukrainians to Hamas and then highlight that in the media, spin it that Ukrainians have sold some of the weapons to Hamas and try to play that. In the meantime, Israelis know very damn well that their tanks are being burnt with Russian Cornets systems, and the methods that Hamas is using are very similar to what Russian advisors would be training them at. to do. Ex-ambassador of Israel in Russia came out with a statement. He pointed a finger at Russia and accused them and said it's completely fault of Russia. Russia actively participated in preparing Hamas for this operation. And Putin came out also in Russia and said that this is an issue of Palestinian state, and Palestinian state has a right to exist, and that the whole war is another fall of United States external politics. It's the same motive that Putin likes to play. NATO go back to the borders of 91, Iranian shahids being supplied to Russia and being used on the front, and some of the chips that are being used by Russia in the Russian systems produced in China. These are all issues of the same chain. There is that axis of evil. Remember that statement that America used back in the day? So now it's a chain. You can call it axis or a chain of evil countries, evil players. And Biden administration did mention it probably in autumn before February's invasion by Russia into Ukraine, and he did outline that the world can unite now against the dictatorial regimes, and I think it's the main narrative that can be very successful, a fight between free countries, between democratic countries and dictatorships. And Ukraine is always coming up in a lot of news, and almost every second news about Israel. Either Ukraine is supporting Israel or United States choosing which weapons go where. So Russia is actively peddling the rhetoric of United States now turning away from Ukraine and sending weapons to Israel instead. They even handpicked one of the congressmen in the United States who made a similar statement that all the weapons should be transferred to Israel. But we know that the real situation is different. It's just Russia playing their psyop on this. So, talking about our front here in Ukraine, there are news about Russians hitting Avdiivka en masse. Let's go back to the map and try to comment on what's happening there. Perhaps let's start with Avdiivka. It is not just shelling, it is actual active motion of Russian troops trying to storm our positions here in that Avdiivka region in the center of the map. At the same time, they're also active in Kupiansk, up in the north, in that direction. So overall, Russian troops are very active on the front, and the explanation is rather simple. They finally understood that the tactics of pulling them apart actually works. We used to pull them apart on different parts of the front. Now they are doing the same tactics, using the same tactics on the front. They're attacking near Kupiansk first, then they attack near Avdiivka to preclude us from throwing more troops near Bakhmut, and so that we would be solving that problem by choosing where to send our troops, up further to the north, near Kupiansk, or to Avdiivka in the south. And overall, the main goal for them is to distract us from active actions in the south. We're in Tokmak region, where we're slowly but still moving forward. And they're still trying to counterattack there, but they don't have much success. Similar situation is near Велика Новоселка and Заветное Бажание. And I think we can just provide general highlights. We won't dive into every shed and every grove. There are a lot of other reviewers who go into details. But I want to say that we, as a country, are on the offensive only in Велика Новоселка, near Bakhmut, and near Tokmak. These are the three parts of the front where we are advancing, and we're holding in defense positions everywhere else. And behind the enemy's attempt to try to force us to pull our reserves apart, there is also another task they're trying to achieve, to take proper positions for the winter campaign that would allow them to hold territory easier till they replenish, refit their troops, rotate, and then will attempt another attack. There was also, thank you, Alexey, there was also a statement about some success by Alexander Tarnavsky, the commander of the southern group, saying that Ukrainian missile troops and artilleries have executed about 700 successful tasks in the last 24 hours. They destroyed a bunch of warehouses, 6 units of artillery systems on the Russian side, and over 150 occupants lost by the aggressor. So do you think these actions, they give us additional upper hand for our attacks? So near Verbovoye, there are several important heights that will definitely change our disposition on that area, but without additional troops that we need to bring into that situation, it would be very difficult to capture these heights. We can capture a couple 100 yards, right, and move things around, and you can see the protrusion starts to move towards Verbovoye. You can see the enemy trying to counterattack here and poke us back in the side. But one needs to understand that we don't bring 3 or 5 brigades into that breakthrough. It will be difficult to even hold it. If we have reserves, I think we do, but command, I think, has a plan how to put them in. I want to say that in general, both sides are very worn out, both us and them, but both sides still have potential to use. Some potential for the offensive, so they are still attacking, and we are on the offensive where we can as well. There were some statements today that in Russia they will forego mobilization effort before the Putin's re-election, which, as we understand, are going to happen in spring of next year. So they'll be probably continuing a back burner, kind of a slow mobilization effort. Right, Nikolai, they never ceased it. They started it in March of 22 and it continues. There was a big wave initially, and after that they understood that, at least from the educational standpoint, it's difficult. The capacity of their training facilities is maybe 100,000 people. Together with Belarus, maybe 110,000. So if you call upon 300,000 reservists, maybe you throw 100 of them to the front, right? Put another 100 to train what to do with the other 100. While in the meantime, they can still continue recruiting, and they're trying to on a slow burner, and they can also, what they're doing, they're offering significant monetary rewards. So some people are choosing it to jump from the lower class to a next level in the society. And for now, it's enough. What they can recruit with these carrots, it's enough for them. They, of course, would want to have more, but they also have issues with armaments, with actual arms for the troops. But they have issues with military-industrial complex, and we are refitting weapons and equipment much faster with the help of our allies than they do. And it seems like it will be a very, very long story. So the spring of next year, we'll be talking that they're still forming their reserves, likely. Part of them will already be probably utilized and grinded and dead here in the Ukrainian soil, but they will still be aggregating their reserves. Germany announced a package of military aid to Ukraine worth of 1 billion euros. It includes Patriot systems, SLS, SLM missiles, mid-range and long-range reach, a bunch of rockets to these complexes, 10 Leopard tanks, Leo 1, 3 Gepards. So this is, air defense, self-propelled system. Gepards are the ones that have they have paired machine guns. Right, this is 35 millimeter weapons system. It's a perfect machine. It works very effectively. Germans are good at producing military equipment. They, indeed, with that transfer, are fortifying our air defense systems. And now, as it's been published, we do not have to fight it, but to hide it. That group of assets can actually cover Odessa and those sensitive ports. To Iris serious for us to cover certain blanks in our air defense systems, and we are preparing for next winter. We are preparing for better defense for our bigger cities, 1 million plus citizens, because Russians will likely use that as well as targets. And also some ports in the rivers and the ocean ports, we can cover those as well. And we're opening more points on the border with Romania to transfer the grain and to use that country as our aid for grain deal. So there are a lot of projects apparently happening now with Romania, which is good. That actually brings us back to Mezhgorya project that we talked about. Right, exactly, that one. The one that me and Romanenko came to Bucharest for a couple of days and did spend a lot of effort there. So one of the projects would be also for us to have a railroad that would connect all Baltic countries, and that would go through Carpathy Mountains and then go to Bucharest. Right? This is the project of connecting three seas: Baltic, Black Sea, and Mediterranean. And this project is valued at 480 billion in this project and for its development. And if Ukraine will be an active player in this logistics, then we actually can perhaps participate actively with some and bring a lot to the table in this project as well. And I'm glad that we're participating and engaging with Romania, very undervalued country for us. They were one of the first ones who agreed to prepare our F-16 pilots. And we running a little late, but we finally understanding it, which is great, that they are a very important partner. And that people's diplomacy and higher level diplomacy are very valuable. This is a good example of them working on our borders. Let's go to our other neighbor, to Poland. Andrzej Duda said that the war in Middle East will deflect some attention from Ukraine, and it will allow Putin to continue work against Ukraine and kill more people. So with that, Ambassador of United States in NATO did declare that American aid to Israel will not harm American help to Ukraine. So here's a question about shifting the attention point that is being brought up, for example, by Poland. Doesn't it pose a question for us that we strategically need to make sure we are capable of self-sustaining economy and military-industrial complex? So I tested that point of view at the forum today in Europe, and I want to say that Ukrainian topic is not blocked by Israeli tragedy and war. They asked me the question here, and I did send it back to people asking and to speakers, what do you think? And the joint answer was no, it didn't cover that. Of course, Israel war is tragic and important, but Europeans also understand that the potential for escalation via Russia and Ukraine conflict is definitely huge, especially for Ukraine. Israel is a bit more south, not technically in Europe, but they do understand that these two are separate problems. And also as America, they have separate budgets and separate ways to address both of them. America actually came up with an idea of maybe combining both packages together because it'll be easier to push it through the Congress because they'll vote for both packages together. So that's an interesting development. But as for us as a country, we need to continue improving our partnership qualities. We need to keep improving our military-industrial complex so that we can actually be independent in terms of military capacity and many other things. I did want to bring attention that there is a joint request in the American Congress of combining funding for both Israel and Ukraine as a single package for adoption. Before that, Biden, I should remind our viewers that he did talk about $100 billion aid to Ukraine that would carry them through to 2025. And he did comment on joining that package with Israeli package to make sure it would be easier for Ukraine to acquire this aid. And now a question: if that is, imagine that this is the last aid that we get for the whole 2024, would it be enough to cover our needs for interbudgetary needs for 2024? It depends upon what we're talking about. If it is $100 billion, that'll be a great breakthrough. Then we will have guaranteed covered issues for our funding for 2024, even though in America there could be debates and they might as well change that amount later, but it still would be a great achievement. Now, there are different kinds of rhetoric coming from United States, and for example, some of the statistics in the Republican Party, the number of people who think that aid to Ukraine needs to be dwindled jumped by 10% in a week. Our previous stats jumped 10% in a year. So there are definitely things happening. And there are some populists like Trump, that Indian candidate, So, new Kennedy on the Democratic side, he's, I guess, independent now. They're all playing on the theme that Ukraine is wasting money without purpose. And the question of aid to Ukraine will be hanging by a thread the whole year. Even and if we will get 100 billion allocated for us, it doesn't guarantee that this money will not be revoted and changed and reallocated somewhere else later and restructured. So we'll need to get used to that. We'll be living in under that risk of probable withdrawal of aid by United States or diminishing. So it will be a difficult year. We need to drop our illusions and continue fighting for our goals as much as we can. And of course, Alex, I think we need to emphasize the growth of our partnership qualities, as you mentioned. As I said, exactly, Nikolai, we need to put a calculator on the table and need to start calculating what is the American benefit in this whole situation? Why do they need to finance? This way it will make sure the whole system will continue working. And if we are leaving that agenda to Americans, if we are not participating in it, Russian propaganda is definitely active in the United States. Putin's money are actively finding their targets. Unfortunately, there is much less lobbying on the Ukrainian side in their media. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people who do favor Ukraine and who try to make sure that the voice of sanity prevails. Satellites, in other news, noticed a rather big railroad event on the border between Russia and Korea. A train with 73 cargo rail cars in the Korean city of Tamangan. So some people are even dare to compare Korea to being like Urals in the Second World War, of maybe producing something for Russian Federation. I think that's exaggeration, but we understand yet that Korea is an enclave of essentially slave force, slaved and forced labor that can be used. And how much do you think they can be used? How much can they provide in both existing items and maybe produce something for Russia? Nikolai, look, Korea is a very closed community. It's very difficult to provide any analysis on the entities like that. There are different estimations and they differ by orders of magnitude, so it's very difficult to predict what Korea can do. And there was even a different piece of information that Russia was actually helping Korea to do some construction in that city, and that they send those cars from Russia to unload some valuable cargo for Korea. But on the other hand, Korea can load them back with something and send back to Russia. But on the objective side, logistical leg from Korea to the front is huge. It's very long. So it cannot be used for rapid addressing of issues. But I'm thinking they will exchange something because Putin and Kim Jong-un did not meet for nothing. So for us, it's definitely a threat, especially in the light of possible threats of diminishing aid from the West. So it is doubly so. And also in the news, we see that China is supplying some gray semiconductors of a rather high quality, comparable with fifth generation of Intel chips. So that's definitely concerning for us. And as many people say, Korea is a handheld bull terrier or lapdog of China. I don't think that's exactly the point, but they definitely coordinate their reaction and their actions. And I think this is the drawback of a prolonged war, of attrition. When the war is quick, when it's in a flash, other countries do not have time to react to it. When the war becomes a lengthy endeavor, other countries think about their possible revenue streams and they jump into the fray. Just a year ago, Korean participation was frowned upon, right? So situation did change. On the other hand, if North Korea will start participating and providing some aid to Russia, I don't think South Korea and Japan will be standing aside. So they likely will also counter that effort with some of their. So you did mention the microchip supply from China. That news actually talks about Russian statements where some officials already officially confirming that China is supplying processing power, processing units for Russia equal to the capabilities of Intel i5. And it seems like it would be very difficult to stop this decision if that has been made in China. And they will likely continue providing this support to Russia. So here is my question. Do you think China, which is now steamrolling towards a collision on the collision course with the United States, do you think they can start the operation in Taiwan before elections in the United States occur? I think technically they can do that, but the results of that operation, it's much more difficult to calculate. It's also difficult to understand whom China does want, Biden or Trump. Russia definitely wants Trump. And in this light, we can say that China can start the military operation against Taiwan, but we don't know the outcome of it. And I want to say that America is slowly waking up and getting mad about all these terrorists, including Hamas in Gaza and the hostages, American hostages taken there. So chances are that China, if it starts a conflict where United States is one of the sides, will likely suffer a lot because United States will want to make sure China is not doing any of these operations again for any foreseeable future. So it will be beaten up economically and maybe in some other ways very seriously. So we'll have to monitor that situation. And we'll have to see that meeting in the framework of Big Three, how will they affect that politics. And remember, we talked about the tradeway that was supposed to go through India, Israel, Saudi Arabia. So now with what's happening in Israel, there's definitely that plan is probably torpedoed and out of whack for a while. So Chinese interest can also be behind what's happening now in Israel. And China doesn't appreciate if India will be a new production hub. So now, basically, with what's happening in Israel, even if India produces and manufactures certain items, how will they be delivering them to Europe and to other partners? So apparently, that project was very serious at G20. There were even money dedicated and allocated for that. It promises a lot of benefits for Saudi Arabia, which was an active player in that project. So they're supposedly very intense about carrying this project through, and they need to be sure that they are really well connected with Israel and that there are no gray zones between Israel and Saudi Arabia that would preclude reliable delivery of goods between two countries. Right, but you cannot just drop off the threat of Muslim extremists. In Saudi Arabia, there is a Prince Mohammed who is managing the country. He is basically in a similar paradigm as Peter the Great for Saudi Arabia. And the way he does it, he invites foreign experts to prop up an industry. They train their own experts to basically launch that industry. And then after that, Saudi Arabia purchases that company, the branch of that company on their territory. And they have already a couple generations of engineers and other experts who can maintain and sustain and continue this effort. So Saudi Arabia, with the whole effort, they were actually relying upon Israel and Israeli experts in order to continue that effort of increasing their industrial capabilities. So I think right now, looking at the conflict in Israel, they're looking at it in a rather mad state towards those who ignited it, because it does stomp their plans. And even though it was Iraq who was the main intermediary between Israel and Saudi Arabia, China was given the palm and the honors and was pronounced as the main negotiator, intermediary. But in essence, this is a very important link. India, Israel, Saudi Arabia, this is a very important link to consider this war in light of. So I think Saudi Arabia leadership is now actively trying to find ways and negotiate with India, United States, and Israel how to continue the project with the road. We don't know if there'll be a direct conflict between Iran and China. In modern world, it's difficult to predict if things will happen. In my opinion, this modern world started with a 30-year war, and it'll probably be concluded that period with another 30-year war. Again, not like a continuous war, but different sporadic wars in different parts of the world, and they'll be going on for another 10, 15 years in different parts of the world. It's not like Second World War, but there'll be a chain of regional conflicts where interests like that will be resolved in a military fashion. So that brings me back to Kissinger, who expressed recently, analyzing war between Russia and Ukraine, that after this war, and he has that phrase, there'll be no gray zones. I don't know what logic do you counterimpose on that 30-year war. Well, yeah, I don't mean the whole span of 30 years. I use it as a general length of these conflicts. The scale of changes probably will take about 30 years. But after the original one, 30-year war, there was Westphal Peace Accords were signed, and the security system was devised for the world. So after this series of conflicts happening now, we don't know what will be the new safety system. And just looking at these gray points, Alexey, that exist in the world, and there are many of them, I'm a little hopeful because one of these gray zones are mostly closed, and I mean Karabakh, the one between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is a feeling that there are some forces in today's world how to wipe those gray zones out using force. No, Nikolai, I think Karabakh is a very local story. It's half the Kiev district. It's not too big. But there are huge gray areas in Africa, huge gray zones in Middle East. So there are a lot of things that still need to be cleared. Unfortunately, there is still a lot of conflicts that need to be waged before everything becomes better and these zones disappear. Okay, the last piece of news. The court in Ukraine arrested corporate rights of 3 sanctioned Russian oligarchs, Friedman, Avin, and Kosogov. And as Ukrainian special services, protective services are saying, or Ukraine Security Ministry is saying that these people have direct access to Putin and are supporting Putin in different fashions and his military effort. So it's interesting that after Ukrainian journalist Tkach attacked Freedom verbally in Britain, asked him and tried to interview him on his position, Friedman actually relocated from United Kingdom to Israel because it's easier for him to fly from Israel to Moscow, and he actually is in Moscow now. And as the sources in his vicinity, in his immediate surroundings, are telling that now he's going to be in Moscow much more often. So in my point of view, one of those oligarchs dropped his mask. He used to be such a preserve, was very quiet, working for all the intels of the world, I guess, tried to agree and negotiate and be an intermediary with different ones. There was a story where he offered $1 billion to an American ambassador to pay somewhere to get out of sanctions. So now, in light of all that coming to public knowledge, he now officially moved his dwelling to Israel, and he's going to fly to Moscow and to other cities in Europe from Israel. So, do you think on the backdrop of that, should Ukraine turn to Israel with an official request to at least sanction him? Maybe we should, but Israel doesn't really give their citizens out. So we could only exacerbate our relations with Israel by asking something that would not be available. I don't think that's the right way. But speaking of courts, I think Friedman will be caught up eventually with in Moscow or London, because most of oligarchs keep their money overseas, and that means they're vulnerable. Now, speaking of courts, we didn't touch upon this topic, but we know, for example, in Ukraine, the company that makes Archer sniper systems, the best snipers in the world are actually keep Archer in high esteem, high value. So Archer now has issues, and another military complex, Luch, which is also producing some military components. Those few active military companies that produce successful products in Ukraine, they're actually now apparently facing some difficulties, and they're accusing left and right different government and non-government sources of hindering their work. I don't think we can say that they're clean and fluffy. They probably are somewhat corrupt in some aspects of it, but they're also producing valuable input for our warfighting effort. So I want to bring our public attention to this matter. That I know that professional military layer knows about these details, and common folk don't really know about it. But there is definitely an investigation going on, and we need to make sure this investigation is clear, it is transparent, so we can see what's happening, and that investigation would not hinder the capacity of these companies to produce systems that are used on the front. Because if there are corrupt people there, corrupt actors, we should prosecute them, but we should not stop the functioning of these companies because they are bringing value to the front. So this is a very important point I wanted to make at the end of our stream. If somebody is avoiding taxes or involved in some corruption schemes, they should be individually brought to responsibility. But yeah, I also was reading a post today by Yarovaya, who is very well connected in the industrial complex here in Ukraine, and she is paying attention and bringing light to these matters. So please monitor her publications. Alexey, I think that's it for today, most of it. Thank you for that stream. Our next stream will happen, I guess we'll discuss if it will be Thursday or a little further. But thank you for participation, and thank you, dear viewers, for spending your hour, 45 minutes with us. Till the next stream. Thank you. See you guys.